Hey, Kathy Benardo here from the Northeast Assisted Fertility Group. Today's special video is about New York State and surrogacy law. And we have a special guest right here, Sanford M. Benardo, co-founder of the Northeast Assisted Fertility Group and a lawyer who specializes in assisted reproduction law. He's also my husband.
Good to be with you, Kathy.
Thanks for being here. So, Sanford, I'd like you to explain the current state of surrogacy in New York State.
All right, right now there's a law in New York that prohibits commercial surrogacy. And that means three things. Number one, if you are a woman who wants to be a surrogate mother and you live in New York, you can't do it and get paid for it. Number two, if you're a clinic, you want to help a family create embryos and transfer embryos to a carrier in New York State, you can't do it if you're in New York. And number three, if you are intended parents, which is the term that's used, and you need a carrier and you are New York residents, you can do it, but you need to go out of state to find your carrier.
So the carrier has to live out of state?
The carrier has to live out of state, but the intended parents can be from New York, but the clinic also needs to be out of New York.
So the embryo transfer has to take place outside of the New York clinic?
That's right, Kathy.
But the embryos can be created in New York State. They just have to move.
They would have to be shipped out of New York. A lot of people do that, and some people go straight to a clinic outside New York. Depends upon your situation and relationship with your doctor.
Okay. So, Sanford, what makes a state good for surrogacy or not so good for surrogacy?
Well, in certain states, there are laws that are statutes, written laws, which prohibit or permit surrogacy, and the ones that permit surrogacy are good states. We have Illinois now as a state that allows for surrogacy. New Jersey is another one. Other states have case law, which is judge-decided law, which again give us guidelines as to what's permissible in a surrogacy. Massachusetts is one of those states, California another. And then there are other states where there's nothing at all but the judge's own decision based upon each case on an individual basis. That's what happens right now in Pennsylvania, for instance, Ohio as well.
So what are some of the best states that you work with for surrogacy?
Well, we like to work in a number of states. Right now, Ohio and Pennsylvania are states that we've had long established relationships with. We certainly work in Massachusetts, which is a wonderful state on the East Coast for surrogacy. We also do work in New Hampshire, which has statute as of several years ago related to surrogacy. And we can go as far afield as Georgia and Texas, which are states that have either case law, no law, or statutory language that allows for surrogacy.
And what states do we just avoid for surrogacy?
Well, this is always changing, but at present, New York is still a state that we have to avoid because the statute in New York considers commercial surrogacy to be a felony. Other states like Arizona and Michigan are also particularly bad states for surrogacy. We'd never consider a relationship with a carrier from that state.
So people who want to use surrogates can live anywhere in the country. It's just the surrogates can't live in those states where surrogacy is prohibited.
That's right, Kathy. And people who want a surrogacy endeavor actually can live anywhere in the world, even in countries that prohibit surrogacy. But the key is working with a carrier that lives in a state that will permit her to become a surrogate mother, reside there, deliver there, and get paid by virtue of a contract that's enforceable in that state.
So, Sanford, New York has been a state where surrogacy has been prohibited, but now there's some new legislation proposed. Can you just give us a little idea about what that's about and what effect that will be if it goes into effect? Sure.
Well, there's legislation. There's been talk for many years of making surrogacy legal in New York, but now the political climate is such that a lot of people think it's going to happen, that Cuomo will sign something. So there's legislation that would allow, in a certain format, for commercial surrogacy to occur in New York, meaning women who live in New York and want to carry a baby for somebody else with a contract can get paid to do so.
It also means for the clinics that they can actually do the embryo transfer in New York instead of having New Yorkers have to go out of town to a different clinic, right?
Right. The key beneficiaries, and we don't know what the final form of this law is going to be. It's still being debated. As of now, we don't do surrogacy in New York. But the key beneficiaries, I think, are going to be women who want to do this and the clinics in New York who for many years have been telling their patients who need a carrier in a commercial sense to have to go elsewhere and move the embryos to another state.
So New Yorkers were always able to use surrogates, and they had to go out of state to find a surrogate.
Right.
Usually it's very unusual for a recipient couple, intended parents, to find a surrogate down the block from them. They always had to go pretty far, at least out of state, to find their surrogate. So for New Yorkers who want to use surrogates, it won't change that much other than maybe they can stay with their doctor. So the real difference is now women who live in New York can serve as carriers, and clinics can now do the medical work for surrogacy, right?
Well, everything turns on the payment, the commercial aspect. If your sister or cousin, if let's say you live in Manhattan or Westchester County, someplace in New York, your sister or cousin wants to help you out because you're going through a difficult time and carry for you, presumably she's not getting paid, and there's never been a problem with doing everything within New York like that. But for people who need to find somebody who will do this, who will be paid for her time and effort and risk in doing it, they've had to go to another state. And at this point, it means that New Yorkers won't necessarily have to look to another state.
So are you hopeful that this legislation will pass?
Yes, I am hopeful. I think that what we've seen in New Jersey recently is going to be happening in New York, where there's a protected statutory framework for surrogacy, and it brings us into the year 2019 where we should be.
Excellent. So thank you so much, Sanford, for clarifying surrogacy law throughout the U.S. and especially in New York.
Good to be with you, Kathy. Thank you.
Bye.